Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a recent interview that lays out some pretty serious allegations of government fraud and then proposes a really interesting high-tech solution to fix it. We're going to go straight to the source material to see how this whole story unfolds. All right, so here's the game plan. We're going to start by getting a handle on what the Small Business Administration even does. Then we'll introduce you to the key figure from the interview, get into the weeds on this alleged fraud problem, and then check out the tech-based solution being floated. We'll wrap it all up with the bigger picture vision for American industry that's discussed. First up, let's set the stage. We need to talk about the Small Business Administration. You'll hear it called the SBA, and understand why its mission is described as being just so critical to the entire U.S. economy. Okay, so just how big a deal are small businesses? Well, according to the source, they're an absolute colossal force. I mean, just look at these numbers. They're pulling in 40% of the country's GDP. And get this, they make up pretty much all businesses and manufacturers. Their footprint is just massive. And here's what's really wild. It's not just about the number of businesses, it's about jobs. The source material claims that small businesses are the ones creating 2 out of every 3 new jobs. That makes them a ridiculously powerful engine for the economy. So you might be wondering, where does the SBA fit into all this? Well, its main job is to provide government guarantees on loans. What that does is it gives local banks the confidence to lend capital to new entrepreneurs, the lifeblood they need to get a business off the ground or even buy an existing one. All right, let's shift gears and talk about the central figure in this story, Kelly Loeffler. Her journey from growing up on a farm all the way to the U.S. Senate is really presented as the foundation for why she's in this role now. The interview really traces her path. It starts on a 4th-generation family farm out in rural Illinois. She waitressed to put herself through college, eventually became a CFA charterholder, then co-founded a crypto company called Bakkt, and ultimately served as a U.S. senator. It's quite a trajectory. Okay, now we get to the real heart of the issue presented in the source. A huge allegation of widespread, multi-billion-dollar fraud, specifically within government programs that the SBA was in charge of during the pandemic. And this is a pretty stunning claim from the interview. The argument is that instead of going after the fraud from those pandemic-era loan programs, the previous administration tried to just forgive it all, to the tune of $200 billion, to just, sweep it under the rug. And that really set the stage for a massive investigation into where all that money actually went. And we're not talking about small amounts here. The discussion points to specific states where investigations supposedly turned up some eye-popping numbers. The source mentions $430 million in Minnesota and an incredible $9 billion in COVID-era fraud in California alone. And it wasn't just the pandemic loans. Take a look at this number. This illustrates another big area of concern, the 8A program for disadvantaged businesses. The source alleges that this program, which handles a whopping $40 billion in contracts every year, became really vulnerable to widespread misuse. So the big question is, how could something like this happen? Well, the source points to a bunch of different ways. It alleges there was a total lack of basic guardrails, things like checking for citizenship or if an application was coming from an overseas IP address. This supposedly let money flow to people who shouldn't have gotten it, including multimillionaires and even politically connected insiders through no-bid contracts. So you've got this massive, complex problem. What's the solution? Well, according to the interview, it's all about tech. The proposal is to deploy advanced data analysis technology from Palantir to basically follow the money. And it's described as this really systematic process. First, the tech pulls all the different data sets together. Then it uses AI to spot suspicious patterns that a human could literally never find. After that, it crawls the network to map out connections between all the players, pointing investigators exactly where they need to look. Finally, humans come in to verify what the AI found. And what this really boils down to is a fundamental shift, a move from the old way to a new way. The goal is to ditch a system that's supposedly vulnerable to political influence and cronyism and replace it with one that's automated, transparent, and based on rules that are actually enforced. Now, this isn't just about catching the bad guys. The source connects this whole fraud-fighting effort to a much bigger vision, the re-industrialization of America, all powered by legitimate small businesses. But there's a big hurdle standing in the way of that vision, a massive shortage of skilled workers. The interview states that right now there are 600,000 open manufacturing jobs just waiting to be filled. That's a huge gap we'd need to close to bring these industries back. So the strategy laid out is this multi-part plan. It starts with education, using community colleges and even programs in junior high to get kids excited about skilled trades again. And it also involves changing policies, like making sure manufacturers have the capital they need to grow.
And here's a key piece of that plan: a bill to double the SBA loan limit for manufacturers all the way up to $10 million. The interviewer calls this increase, well, exactly what you see here: rocket fuel. It's the kind of cash injection that lets a company buy new equipment and really scale up.
Even with all this talk about fraud and the huge challenges ahead, the interview actually wraps up on a really optimistic note about the country's economic future. And this final thought really puts everything in perspective. The idea here isn't just about fixing problems from the past. It's about laying the groundwork for long-term national strength and innovation for, generations to come. So if you take one thing away from all of this, it should be this core argument, that there's a direct line between restoring integrity to these government programs and fueling a whole new era of American entrepreneurship. The argument is that one simply can't happen without the other. And that leaves us with a big question to chew on. As data analysis and AI get more and more powerful, could they really be the key to making these massive government programs more efficient, more accountable, and ultimately something the public can actually trust?